Hi, and welcome to another Austin Software Cooperative. We're doing another book review. This is a continuation this month, talking about participation and the democratic theory by Carole Pateman. We're going to dig further into some of the chapters and then discuss as we're going on some of those topics. Watson?
Thanks. All right, a quick review about this book. So we've got chapter 1. It goes through and says essentially our contemporary view of democracy might be biased. It's heavily influenced by an intellectual named Joseph Schumpeter. Essentially, it's saying that since most citizens are apathetic, the view of democracy, a non-naive view of democracy, should go ahead and take into account the apatheticness, and it should basically set up a market where people vote for the best representative. And assume that people will not be participatory, let's say. Now, the author is saying that it's a myth that I want to say the most influential people for democracy for the United States thought that people don't want to participate, and that is what they're going to bring to bear against the contemporary view of democracy. So we have Rousseau, John Stuart Mill, also James Mill, and they go ahead and bring in a view, position that democracy actually should encourage participation in the populace, regardless of the apathy. So you have Jacques Rousseau, famous philosopher, waxing poetically, really, about the, democracy is great if you include the populace or the demos, the people who actually have the right to vote in the participatory, if you include them in the decision making and allow them to participate in the decision making process, it kind of refines them and makes them better citizens. And John Stuart Mill is another one who takes that position as well. Any questions so far about the review?
No questions for me. There is a bit of an echo from one of the devices.
There's an echo, okay. Hold on here. Let me see.
there?
Can you hear the echo now?
Try again.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
No echo.
Okay. Let me know. I actually can't hear you through my headphones, so that's weird. But I'll keep my earpiece on. So let's go into chapter 3, the sense of political efficacy and participation in the workplace. This is where they take the position, or they try to build up the argument for participation. Let's go ahead and make this bigger. People who have a sense of political efficacy are more likely to participate in politics than those in whom this feeling is lacking. And it has also been found that the underlying sense of political efficacy is a sense of general personal effectiveness, which involves self-confidence in one's dealing with the world. So again, with this, I guess, political science, there is a reliance on empirical studies of and surveys, so on and so forth, with how people view how they engage in politics. And this book is a political science book. So they make their argumentation based off of what, I mean, you may want to say scientific studies. This chapter is going to take the position that people will be better citizens if they are trained to be more democratic. They're going to be more apathetic if they are trained to be in a authoritative structure. So just as low status worker is in a hierarchical authority structure in the position of permanent subordinate, so in some technologies, he can be subordinated also to the external demands of a technical process. So essentially, what the author is saying and gathering through multiple studies is that what they found is they're through the experience of the regular citizen, right? So we're talking about what they call the majority. There are different places where they will experience an authoritarian hierarchy or structure when as far as decision making, and there are situations where they will experience a more democratic structure. This chapter makes the argument and takes and drives or draws from studies that the citizen is influenced heavily in how they experience the workplace. So they're saying that in the workplace, if the workplace is more authoritarian, they will be more apathetic, meaning that they will not care about the decisions that affect them and rely on a hierarchy. if they are in a situation where it's more participatory, we're going to define participatory later, then they're going to be less apathetic. So they're going to care more about the decisions. So they go through and look at some studies in different industries. There are industries where people aren't involved as much. I want to say in this automobile work, it's highly rationalized, so workers have practically no opportunity to solve problems and to contribute their own ideas. And in the line itself, the worker has no control of the pace or technique of his work, so no room to exercise skill or leadership. And this situation lends itself, since it's essentially less autonomy, they essentially care less about the decision making process. So they're kind of being groomed to be in an authoritative structure. In the printing industry, since it's largely a craft industry, the worker has less degree or has a high degree of personal control over his work and has high internalized standards of workmanship and responsibility, a very large degree of freedom from external control. All these factors add up to a socially personality characterized by a strong sense of individualism and autonomy and a solid acceptance of citizenship in the larger society. So they have a highly developed feeling of self-esteem and a sense of self-worth, and therefore ready to participate in the social and political institutions of the community. So the argument is that essentially in a more, I want to say, situation where it's rote work, where people don't have to think, they care less about decisions and they don't want to be political and therefore don't want to be democratic. In a situation where they're more engaged, then, and so they have more autonomy, they do want to be more democratic. So we hear Blauner concluded that the nature of a man's work affects his social character and personality, and that at an industrial environment tends to breed a distinct social type.
What is the printer industry? I mean, what that to me, this doesn't sound like current. Is that saying the current printer industry, or are we saying in the past what the printer industry used to be?
There's still print industry. So
Right.
think of the design side of things. So
Uh-huh.
people who do the layouts for magazines
Right.
and layouts for websites, that's the print industry. Anything that you read on the physical, it's not gone yet.
All right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What was the another one that we were talking about recently? I think was someone else was related to work in the music industry and a lot of the I guess the supporting efforts all around events and stuff like that. Seems like that would be similar. Lighting.
Yeah.
other things like that.
They use the term craftsmanship. I like that term, but artisan. Anything where people have more engagement, they want to have a stronger say. And so democracy comes to play. Let's go forward here. So they're saying just as the low, let me just go through this. Yeah. Although participation in the workplace has been shown to be important for wider political participation, it could be argued that nevertheless, it is not of central importance because today and increasingly leisure is the most important part of a worker's life in the sphere where he expects to gain
You have a
and
bit of
can gain, right, psychological satisfactions. Writers who argue for the central importance of leisure in the life of today's rank and file workers are tending to regard work as something having purely instrumental value and centering their aspirations on leisure. Thus, one could, by extending this argument, suggest that leisure might provide a replacement for work so far as the development of the sense of political efficacy is concerned. And the author is saying that leisure is not as important as you might think. Those persons who participate most in public types of leisure activities, like so voluntary organizations and politics, are just those groups, the upper social economic status groups that are most likely to work in an environment conducive to the development of a sense of personal efficacy. So essentially, they're probably going to be in the artisan category. So they're taking a position that essentially people view work as like the idea of I don't live to work, right? I work in order so that I can live and do things that I want to do.
I'm not trying to be no fucking weirdo.
Say again? I think I missed that. Yeah. So they're saying that those people will most likely be in jobs that will, well, as a higher socioeconomic people who want to participate in democracy, they will be in a job that will allow them to have more decision-making power. So again, they have some studies here that talk about blue collar workers versus white collar workers. And the white collar workers, um, they they want to participate more in democracy, in the decisions, I should say. And as a side note, people that dislike their job, they exercise very little control. A lot of this goes into the argument for Daniel Pink's book, which talks about people want to have autonomy in their job and all that stuff. So satisfaction in the job declines as skill level declines. Why is this important? Essentially, they're creating an argument that if you want to develop people that want to participate in democracy, since they're spending 8 hours a day in this institution that you can just call work, you probably should have them participate in the decision-making process more if you want to develop people that want to engage in democracy more. If you don't, and you just want them to vote for a representative and they don't want to participate, go ahead and have them in an authoritative structure for most of the day. Let's go ahead and get through. So essentially, for all the surveys and all the studies, it's really, it's kind of a home run as far as people that want to or participate in democracy in the workplace. It aligns very well with their artisanship or their craftsmanship, right? So people that have decision-making power in their work, they care more about democracy. People that don't are more apathetic. It's kind of a home run hit as far as the studies go. Any questions about that chapter?
Oh, it's interesting. And no questions though.
All right. Now we're going to get into definitions.
We do have a question in the chat, I see.
All right,
Um,
let's see.
What's the effect of job security, i.e. the relative leverage a worker has over their employer?
What's the
Well, I
effect
can
of
explain the
job
question.
security? Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I was just wondering, we're talking about the creative control or the level of engagement based on that autonomy. But I'm thinking about another vector, which is how safe a worker feels to be able to engage and kind of claw that power, right? And how someone can just give up thinking that, hey, you know what, my job security is so low that any deviation or any idea, quote unquote, can get me fired. So it's not the fact that this is rote, it's the fact that I don't even feel like I can go beyond what I'm told every day, if that makes sense.
Yeah. They give an example, I want to say in this chapter or the next chapter, of job security and engagement. I think one of the things is, and we're going to get into it in this chapter, the level of participation and how you define it affects, I guess you could separate the types of decisions that are being made into high level decisions. So you can call them director level decisions and low level decisions. So the day to day, people that have high levels of job security, they participate on the low level. And the author wanted to express that the high level is a problem because we want to get people interested in engaging and participating in the director level decisions as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a factor, that it's in there somewhere to be pay attention to a certain extent.
Yeah. If someone has power over you and you have no job security, you kind of implicitly know, I better not raise my voice. Right. So that's kind of what I think you might be asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the author here goes through multiple definitions of participation. I'm going to read through them all. Essentially, what they decided on is a couple academics' view of participation. So we got French, Israel, and AS say that participation in the industrial spheres refers to a process in which two or more parties influence each other in making plans, policies, or decisions. And it is restricted to decisions that have future effects on all those making the decisions and on those represented by them. This definition, they say, excludes the following situations where individual A merely takes part in a group activity where A merely is given information on the decision affecting him before it is executed, where A is present at a meeting but has no influence. So essentially, what that means is you may hear, hey, we have transparency here. What's implied there is like you're participating in these decisions. What they tease out in this chapter is that in the management science, they found out that when people feel like they have more information, they feel like they have more autonomy because they have more knowledge, they really don't get a say in the participation or in the decision making. So it's kind of like a trick. So they have more job satisfaction. And so they're saying that's not participation. The author here is saying that people that talk about participation, they don't discriminate between the different views of what participation is, because a lot of people who write in economics and management consulting essentially just want to get more buy-in and get more efficiency from workers. So they put it all together and say, oh, they're participating because they were in a meeting and we were transparent. They are saying here that you can call that here pseudo participation. And I want to say that they're saying that that doesn't bring someone into the fold as far as wanting to be more democratic. So we have two different definitions of participation, and I think that
We
they
talk about
are
that with regard to
ahead.
cooperatives. The
I
different
think it
types
applies
of-
to cooperatives as well.
Yeah, and yeah, so we talk about that for different types of cooperatives and people talking about what they're doing, and then if you start digging in, it's do they have the power over the decisions over profit that's brought in for the whole group? Are you going to
Yeah.
have any input on that? And if you don't, then all other levels, including you may have workers that are also managers and whatever else you want to have at all levels. But if there's someone outside that gets to come in to decide the profit, then is it really, I don't know, a cooperative? And that word is too broad, and it's interesting that participation can be stretched so far, because it doesn't make sense to me to think someone participated just because they sat in the room and weren't allowed to speak, but they could listen to you talk. But
Yeah.
they participated.
So that's why we like the academics here. They tease out a definition. Here we go. The final power of decision rests with management, the workers, if they are able to participate, being able to only influence that decision because they are workers. They are in the unequal position of permanent subordinates. The final prerogative of decision making rests with the permanent superiors, aka the management. This type of participatory situation we shall refer to as partial participation. Full participation, that is the form of participation, is a process where each individual member of a decision-making body has equal power to determine the outcome of decisions, right? That's full participation. Like partial participation, full participation is possible at either the lower or higher levels of management. It's going back into, like I would say, director level, and day-to-day you can call operational level, right? So we have partial participation and you have full participation. Partial, very close to what we said, pseudo participation here. Okay. So a critique of literature, if you ever read all of the Harvard literature on change management, it's all about buy-in, right? Just as the term participation is used loosely in much of the literature, so is the concept of democracy. Not only are the two words frequently used interchangeably, but often democracy refers not to a particular type of authority structure, but to the general climate that exists in the enterprise, a climate that is created through the method of approach or style of the supervisor or manager, i.e. democracy is often used to describe situations of pseudo participation, or even merely to indicate the friendly atmosphere. So they're saying they're not synonyms. And so that we have examples of participation. I'm going to jump here. Here. So there's 3 different examples. We've got people that are kind of like mining, I want to say, heavily like assembly line level. You have people that are in retail. And I'm going to jump into this real retail example. The largest experiment in higher level partial participation in Britain is that of the John Lewis partnership, which includes the department stores, and excellent study of this has been published from which this information is taken. Although the orthodox or authority structure has been modified further than at Glacier, in practice, in the partnership, the representative bodies act rather Can you guys hear me? Hello? No, yes.
I hear you.
Taylor, are you there? Okay, cool. Let's go. Essentially, we have at the John Lewis partnership, there's lower level engagement and higher level engagement. At the lower level, they had great participation. And then there was a difference in attitudes at the higher level. And so some observations were made. So it seems like there's a concept of training for subservience. If workers are trained to be in an authoritative structure, they will actually defer and be apathetic and not want to participate. So if you want to develop, again, the greater argument for the book, if you want to develop good citizens who want to participate in democracy and not defer to an authoritative structure, you need to go ahead and have more opportunities to participate and more craftsmanship within the work environment. So more autonomy. Any questions about this chapter? The definitions of participation? Nope. All right. So Yugoslavia, I want to say doesn't even exist anymore. They basically wanted to have all the workers there participate in the management of where they worked, and then also in the on the national level. It's a big experiment. I'm gonna go ahead and skip here so we can get to the conclusions, because it was a pretty complicated chapter. Essentially, one would not wish to claim that the systems of worker self-management in Yugoslavia provides a successful example of democratization of authoritative structures, or that the evidence presented here allows many firm conclusions to be drawn. Essentially, it's very complicated. People getting sanctioned, the whole country, these types of weird things. So it's very difficult to draw conclusions from Yugoslavia. But they did have workers doing self-management and then also participating in the national political level. Let's go ahead and do a screen share. All right. There we go. Think you all can see it?
Yes.
So that chapter I just went over really quickly. As far as an overview of the whole book, recent discussions of the theory of democracy have been obscured by the myth of classical doctrine of democracy propagated by Schumpeter. Major contributions to democratic theory of those classical theorists whom we have called the theorists of participatory democracy is to focus our attention on the interrelationship between individuals and the authority structures of institutions within which they interact. In the contemporary theory of democracy, it is the participation of the minority elite that is crucial, and the non-participation of the apathetic ordinary man lacking in the feeling of political efficacy that is regarded as the main bulwark of instability. Essentially, they're saying in the contemporary theory, the dominant theory of democracy right now, they don't want people to participate. They think that if more people participate, there will be an authoritarian structure and it will go against democracy. So the author is saying that goes against the classical view, a proper interpretation of the classical view. So that would be Rousseau, John Stuart Mill, James Mills as well, and Cole. And they essentially say, we basically need more data. We don't have enough, but the door is open and it makes sense that if more people worked in a democratic setting, they would be less apathetic and be better citizens in the sense of they would be more participatory in the process on the local and national level. So any questions?
Is there a critique of like current, I don't know, the last 5 to 10 years political?
This book is from the 70s.
Right. So I'm wondering if anyone's looked at this and then look at what we have now. When we're talking about if the concerns that were raised that if we have more participation, then we're going to have authoritarian and all these other things versus what it's saying would lead to authoritarian or more democratic. And then what do we have now?
So
Or the last
think
20 years even.
the jury's already out
Yeah.
as far as the delineation between lower socioeconomic status and higher economic status, socioeconomic status. Lower prefers authoritarianism. Higher prefers a democratic and more autonomy. That's as far as scientifically, surveys and all of that. That is the crux of the argument for the contemporary view. So even in the past 5-10 years, they're going to say lower socioeconomic status. If you want to involve them more, you're going to get a totalitarian system. The argument for this book is to say, yeah, you would, but go ahead and have the secondary institutions, which means where they work, to introduce them to democracy. And then they're going to be more at home with being involved in decisions that affect them. So it's, I think it's still this book still applies in the last 5 to 10 years. If you
Yeah.
want to take you want to put your evil hat on, they don't want people to participate. They like the contemporary view. They want people to vote and then ignore. I want to say they means
Whoever's in
centralized
power.
power, concentrated wealth.
So it to me, it seems like you could take all of this and look at what's currently happening other parts of the world too, but if we just look at in the US, there's so much that's getting rolled back right now as far as laws that, I don't know, were laws and stuff put in place where I think it had a broader effect on society, and you have things getting rolled back, and it seems like a lot of the direction that's happening is that pseudo participation.
When you say rolled back, I think what you're implying is that there are laws that are being rolled back, and it seems to be against what, if you were to survey the majority, against what their will is.
Yeah, and
I think that's what you're
specifically
saying.
when we're talking about when they have an understanding. So if we go with what it's saying, you need to have an understanding of it, and how does it affect? You're not gonna, if they participate without an understanding, then it's saying we're gonna move towards more authoritarian. But we are moving to you know, less oversight for those in power, and more control and more visibility into, like privacy controls and stuff into everyone else. And there's, for the past 30 years, there's been waves of push for stuff like internet access. What is that going to be? And the views on that type of thing, views on libraries. There's a lot of it's just tied in as far as the same type of, I would say, related ideas. And we're moving, more and more of it's moving away from those sort of things. So like internet and communication, whether it's going to be open or whether it's okay to lock down. And deciding to do that seems more along the lines of that pseudo participation, and decisions have been made and now we're going to tell you why it was a good idea, versus getting people involved to help decide on those, versus when some of those things were put in place and people believe they were good for society, but now we're rolling them back, is what I'm saying. Like literally laws that have been in place and rights and other things are getting eliminated.
Yeah, the contemporary view of democracy is that people are apathetic. They don't want to participate. The only thing they want to do is vote. Right? And so if you were to take telecommunications, internet, that kind of thing, and there are things that are against their own best interests, if they can't really understand it, they don't care. They will just, the only thing that they're caring about is voting for a representative in a very small window. And then they're like, okay, well, I did my best there. And so that's apathetic. They don't care. The contemporary view predicts people doing that.
So whose view is
If you-
that, by the way? Like contemporary view by who?
Okay. So the first two chapters, so that was in the last review, so last month, goes through and takes very influential people on the on democracy, one of them being Joseph Schumpeter, but others as well, right?
Mhm.
And saying this is how they view what democracy is, and they go through different Western democracies and say, here are the models, here's where they failed, here's where they succeeded, and there's empirical studies. People tend to be apathetic, that kind of thing. A big one here to review, the Weimar Republic. So we're talking about Germany pre-World War II. The argument from the contemporary democracy academics is that they actually were democratic and they voted an authoritarian hierarchy, which is led to World War II, led to the Nazis, right? That's
Yeah.
their view. So the
Okay, that's their view.
contemporary, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, well, that's like a super oversimplification. So, because I haven't read the book, so is the author looking at this and I guess from, trying to critique it? Is that, well, this is what they say, but, or is it like, is the author building on this as a, oh, okay, yeah, this is true. Therefore, just for my mind, it's like, is there a critique towards this? Somebody is challenging this that I'm reading? Or is it just taking
The author challenges that view. They're
Yeah, the
saying
author is
participatory
challenging the current
democracy
Okay. Sorry. My head
goes
is about to
against
explode, so I had to. Okay.
the contemporary view.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But the counterintuitive and startling position is that the contemporary view for most political scientists right now is that the majority are apathetic and all they want to do is to participate in a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Of representatives, right? So a republic. They don't want to participate in decisions. So that's the reigning view. So the first part of the book is making arguments for influential political scientists saying, we've already done the science, we've already said and figured out that most people don't care.
Yeah.
The argument for this book is that, hey, assuming that people don't care, it's already accepted that most people are apathetic when it comes to politics. The vast majority of people are apathetic. What you want to do is get them to care. How do you do that? Going through, seeing how they were brought up, they figured out that doesn't have a big influence on if they want to participate in democracy. What they found out is that the workplace is a huge influence on whether they feel like when they participate that it's effective in democracy. When people feel like what they do is effective, then they are less apathetic. So they have to be part of institutions at work where it's in a democracy. So they participate in decisions. Then they become good citizens and they want to participate. And then they start voting in such a way where their decisions are actually involved and efficacious, instead of saying, let me just vote for concentrated wealth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess that the author is accepting the thesis of the majority, the consensus of the let's call it current
Contemporary.
academics, contemporary,
Yep.
which are like really fixed on, neoliberal economics. So, and just say, okay, well, if that's your conclusion, I'll take it as true. I'm not going to challenge it. I'm just going to look for ways to entice people to be more participatory. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. That's what they want. That they're making an argument for cooperatives as a way to make people better citizens.
So,
And they're saying that that is what the classical philosophers, political scientists for democracy wanted. John Stuart Mill, who is super influential on the United States Constitution and all this type of stuff, Jacques Rousseau, and James Mill, and another person named Cole.
I think there is a bit of a challenge from the author that the current views are incorrect when they say that it is democracy. The current views leave it at, yeah, they're apathetic. And so the best we can do is we will bring them in the room and make sure the people that do want to participate are involved and they're talking to you. We're not going to actually try to get you to participate. That's not part of the story. So I think that's where the author would challenge it and go, no, if you're not actively trying to get the populace to participate, figure out the root cause, then you're not doing democracy.
If there's two things, kind of maybe what you're saying. The prediction is if the institutions of the citizen aren't democratic, then they're going to be apathetic. There's no way. They're just basically, it's the authoritarian structure of, say, totalitarianism is just a little bit different than the republic that's going to eventually evolve.
Yeah, so the
call,
author isn't challenging that we're going towards a problem and here's how it is. He's saying you're not trying to fix it though. And what you're claiming is democratic isn't democratic. If you
yes,
want democratic, then here's how we get there. I did want to throw in, and I put it in the chat. I know that we're talking about relating this to cooperatives and the business side, like structures, and that's definitely the main thing. I think the education system, I mean, for most people where it's 18 years of their life before they are going to work, or 16 or whatever, something like that. So a book, Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto, I think very much ties to this. So when you get into, by the time you get into a corporation and the corporate structure, most people have already been made ready for that based on our education systems.
they actually, in this book, take a position that no, even if your family and your education, so the training, they have this second chapter is talking about the training, and the third chapter, even if you have that, it's not as effective as the best predictor is your workplace. You can grow up in complete authoritarian structure. If your workplace is involving you in decision making, that's going to be the biggest predictor of whether you feel that you are efficacious in decision making process, and then also if you are efficacious in the political decision making process. So that was a big part of the book.
Maybe I should say, I think that the education system and how it affects the minds of people before they get out has a big effect on how much they'll accept the workspace. I agree that you could come in and for whatever reason, you're in a position where I think one of the things we're talking about, can you say something or are you going to lose your job, and those things that we we're talking about earlier, job security. That's definitely part of it. And then the most of your life is going to be, for most people, is going to be tied into your work age. So that's for participation, yes, political participation and society. I can see that. I'm saying the education system helps to accept the structure that we have right now. It helps you to accept a structure in the corporations where someone else has authority and you don't. And being apathetic is normal.
Just so you know, the author is saying that is a far second. It could be that it's not, but they studied it. They have literally studied people who are educated within their home and authoritarian structure and education system. So what they're just calling training. And they said, okay, well, the job is far and away way more influential on them. So I would have agreed with you before I read this book, but they disagree. As far as I know, you're saying the secondary, they're saying it's a far second.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feels weird to me to have saying like conversations with, and I don't know what all they've done. This is definitely just my own thoughts on it, but if you're talking to an elementary kid and then you're talking to a teenager and then you're talking to someone in college, and like their views on things, the rigidity of where things are, it's more and more and more. So if we're saying, and not say you don't do one or the other, but if you're going to try to shift people and go, let's change how you think about your work on a daily life once you're in your 20s, versus if our education system said they should be participating, which doesn't mean, I think we talked about this last time, doesn't mean you get to say, I'm not going to learn anything, I'm just going to eat candy all day or whatever. There's a difference on that. But when you're have people that are saying they're interested in learning and they're interested in knowing stuff, but the system is saying, no, you shouldn't explore, this is the path you're going. And then you have a repeat, and high school's a repeat, and then the first couple of years of college, and lots of people realize that, but you just kind of go into it. And so many people go into work after and just step in, and it's the same thing. So then how do you, when we're talking about a change in the workforce, which, yeah, I'm all for that being the major big change. I get what it's saying there, but how are you going to get people to understand? It feels like it's a bigger uphill battle to get people to understand if all of their life they've.
Let me read this.
Working class.
Allman and Verba
Mhm.
found that remembered opportunities to participate in the family and at school did correlate with a high score on the political competence scale in all 5 countries. The impact of opportunities at the higher educational level being of particular importance. It is middle class children who are most likely to score high on the efficacy scale. And we know that middle class families are most likely to provide their children with a participatory family authority structure. Working class families tending to be more authoritarian or to exhibit no consistent pattern of authority, right? So since middle-class children are also more likely to go on to higher education, we begin to see the appearance of a cumulative pattern of participation opportunities. And within this portion, this is where they said, of crucial significance for the development of the sense of political efficacy are opportunities to participate in decisions at one's place of work. So essentially, lower socioeconomic people will have an authoritative structure. So one institution is the family, right? So they have that. And then you have them going to school that has an effect, but it's not enough, right? So essentially, the middle class families are most likely to provide their children with a participatory family authority structure, right? Structure. So it can't outdo the working environment. So they study family structures, they studied education, and they studied the work environment. And it was just the work environment is far and away the biggest.
I'm not talking about the effect it'll have on their participation. What I was saying was, how do you make the change in the work? So that's, if people are accepting of the workplace, then how do you make those changes? Which would go into like the job security and everything else. But if
Maybe entrepreneurs, you're saying entrepreneurs can start a participatory structure.
well, I
versus an
mean, then
authoritative.
it's talking about is it that you have to get a few people that say, hey, everybody needs to we need to start building more businesses that are built from the ground up to be participatory.
Entrepreneurs.
And if you don't do that, then there won't be a change. And I mean, of course, we're trying to do that with cooperatives and everything. So I'm down for that. So I'm not saying like, what is the difference in the effect of participation? If the work versus the education, I'm saying more that the education has an effect on whether or not you're going to have a change in the workplace.
If the entrepreneurs are going to start participatory businesses versus non-participatory businesses.
Yeah, I mean,
if they're educated,
some people are maybe driven for whatever reason, and you just happen to be there. So you're more entrepreneurial is one thing versus saying, why aren't we educating or providing the capability for people to grow up curious and trying to drive, being motivated to learn and everything else. Do you want to work in a dead-end job, or would you like to be devouring all the knowledge you could in school, and then you get out and realize, oh, I can keep learning and doing other stuff? But we don't do that. It's you're taught to be a cog in the wheel, even like a lot of the programming stuff. So then when you get out, it's like, why are they going to push against the system and make a change?
Again, if the jobs that offered them money were participatory, it wouldn't matter. So it would go against the John Taylor Gatto model.
Well, if they are, but how do you get them to be?
Right. So now you're talking about entrepreneurs, people who create jobs.
Right.
So defining them as people who create jobs, how do you get it to where people that create jobs are incentivized to go employee ownership model, say, versus not, or participatory model?
That's only one side is what I'm saying. So then if you say, so one thing that's happening right now, I'm saying, I don't know if y'all are saying this, but Gen Z is a quitter generation and all this stuff. There's this current generation coming into work and everything, and more they're going, no, I'm not going to do this. I'll go take another job where I have more control and I get paid less.
Autonomy.
Right? And so why is that happening? And I would say that the authoritarianism over the workplace is hitting this point where people are not, this younger generation is going, I'm not going to put up with that. And that's not more entrepreneurs. That's a good part. Definitely, yes. Go talk to the local government. Let's get more stuff open to cooperatives, all of that. I'm not saying let's not do those things, but the side of like the negative authoritarianism, everything else, where people are getting sick of it, is pushing them. And that is where I would tie the education in. Like, if there's an effect on that and more people are, if you give more opportunities and people see that they can opportunities, then they're less likely to put up with jobs that they don't have
So
autonomy on.
I think what you're missing is that there's the lower level of participation and the higher level. The lower level, they would be perfectly fine with allowing people to, again, the management science predicts this, and then they have examples of this. The non-directorial levels, right? So lower levels, they will allow them to have autonomy. At the higher level, so the director level, right? So where the surplus goes, that's a different level. And they found that the models work where, oh yeah, let them participate more at the lower level. At the higher level, no. And they're apathetic still. So you can still bring the millennials into the fold and have them be like, I want autonomy. And they don't care about the director level. And so now they're still, it's even, they can get them to work even harder with more efficiency and still control the surplus. So the only way to stop that is to have them participate in the decision making at the lower and higher levels. So they learn decision making. I need to care, not be apathetic. So that was this other chapter with caring about what participation is. They will completely, totally love for someone to, on one level, feel like they're participating if there's transparency. That's one level of the management science. The other level is having them care about the low level and not at the director level. So surplus. So
It's
this book
hard for me to not see it
overlaps.
it's hard for me to not see it through the view, like when you're talking about those, then it's that book, Weapons of Mass Instruction, is really big on how do we think and perceptions. And what you're talking about is perceptions. So people think they have autonomy when they don't.
Yep.
And I think that's taught at an early age, and it continues. So we're bombarded with propaganda and all sorts of things until from a childhood up, and continues until you feel like you have the control of your life that they want you to have, so that at that point you're willing to step right into the larger box that you didn't realize you were already in.
Yeah. Another book that overlaps with this one, I will say, is, I talked about it in the last review, The Class Matrix. And an operative word would be resignation. So when people get into an environment where they get reinforcement as far as their decisions, they could create a coalition that would strike or move against concentrated wealth and all that. But it's just easier to do your day-to-day. It actually, even with your previous training, it makes you internalize an ideology, or what the author called culture, that says this is the best way to be. So it's those day-to-day decisions and environment. When it goes, and I use a fancy phrase, when it goes with your material conditions, it's overwhelming. 8 hours a day is overwhelming. It even beats your education. But that's a different book. The author does talk about education in the conclusion, though. Says, hey, let's go ahead and have people participate in their curriculum and all that as well. So